All right, welcome back. Powers on Sports Podcast. Got a great pleasure for you. We're going to take you live to Berlin, Germany, home of the 2023 Special Olympics. We've got two announcers that are going to be calling the action as part of the Special Olympics. One is a good friend of mine who's been a regular here on the podcast, Drew Fellios for ESPN. And the other is an Olympic gold medalist, a guy you know if you're a sports fan, you know this name back in the day. Olympic decathlon champion in Atlanta 1996, one Dan O'Brien, who also does work for ESPN and NBC. Welcome, gentlemen. Appreciate you joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having us, Jay.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks.
Great pleasure having you guys. First of all, you guys are over covering the Special Olympics, the World Games Special Olympics. First time since 1936. There's been an Olympic event in that stadium, in the Berlin Olympic Stadium. Just talk about walking into that venue, the memories, you know, Jesse Owens, all the great memories in that arena. Also, obviously, there's some other memories from that Olympics as well, Hitler and all that stuff. But just in that arena, talk about that building and that stadium, the drama of that stadium.
Well, this guy's the history buff. I know a lot, certainly, of the 1936 Olympics, but Drew went crazy for that stadium when we drove by it. So he got his pictures today. So I'll let him talk a little bit about what that means to him.
Jason, you pull up to the stadium and you can feel the mystique. It's like there's one entrance, and it's, you know, a stadium, obviously, that one of the greatest sports moments in the history of sports happened there. And as I said, you can just kind of feel it. We all took pictures. We could not actually get in the stadium. We're parked right outside the stadium where our venue is, Hans Brons Plus Stadium, that is housing the athletics competition of the Special Olympics. But, you know, Dan and I were talking, Jason, on the broadcast today, the great story of Jesse Owens, and Dan has a little side story to it with his Olympic knowledge of history that he was able to share, and it's really some riveting stuff.
So we're on the main stadium. We're not in the main stadium, so we're in the practice track. Okay, and so there've been a number of sporting events in that stadium, but not an Olympics. And so the Special Olympics being there is really kind of cool and special. But I'm certainly familiar with the 1936 Olympics, and there's so many great stories. Certainly Jesse Owens winning his 4 gold medals. And you think about how he was able to do that. Carl Lewis replicated it in 1984. Right. But I remember, here's one of the stories that it's one of the greatest inspirational stories of all time. And it's always voted very highly. But Jesse Owens was qualified in the finals for the 100 meters and the 200 meters. The USA team got through in the 4x1, but he needed to qualify in the long jump to have a shot at a gold medal there. And Jesse had trouble with his run up. He had trouble with his run, 2 fouls. And he needed to get a mark. Otherwise, he wasn't going to get into the finals and try and have a chance to win a gold medal. And one of his German opponents saw that he was fouling by a certain amount. Jesse, they weren't allowing him to reach out to his coaches in the stands to get any information. And so, believe it or not, a German athlete by the name of Luz Long put a shoe down. And he told Jesse, look, start from this mark, and it should put you in the right place. So Jesse Owens uses that advice, uses that check mark, and he qualifies for the finals, and he wins the gold medal in the finals, but he also breaks the world record, all due to a German opponent. And Luz Long was one of the best jumpers in the world at that time. And I'm sure that Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime wanted him to, beat Jesse Owens, but it was interesting. And so they call it one of the most selfless acts in Olympic history. And also the greatest show of sportsmanship. Luz Long wanted to compete against Jesse Owens at his best. And he didn't think if he had won the gold medal and Jesse Owens wasn't in the finals, it would have meant as much.
You mentioned the word self. Let's talk about the Special Olympics event. I mean, this is nothing but an event full of athletes. You got over 7,000 athletes from ages 12 and up. I saw a Twitter story of a girl that's 12 years old, the youngest competitor in the Special Olympics. 26 sports, 20,000 volunteers. It's a worldwide event. Just talk about the event, Drew and Dan, about Special Olympics. Obviously, it's such a big moment for these young athletes and young men and women throughout all over the world. Just talk about the thrill that they're getting to experience, the athletic accomplishments they're getting to experience.
Well, Jay, 190 countries are represented here,
Wow.
and we are covering nearly 800 of them at the athletics venue. And clearly, what makes these games different, usually when you go to an Olympics or World Championships, the focus is on first, second, and third. Let's face it, that medal stand. Here, it's the entire race. It's finishing. Whoever finishes first, whoever finishes last probably gets more attention than who finishes first. And everybody is into every single race. You see the families and the friends groups for these athletes. They come into the stadium specifically to watch that athlete compete. There's a little warm-up area on the side, Jay, where the athletes kind of get ready before they actually enter the stadium. Then they have their big moment, and they exit the stadium, and that's when they get together with their families again. And you know, we're seeing 16-year-olds with syndrome, with intellectual disability, and you can tell the struggle they to experience these games for the first time. Man, I'm telling you, you want to cry. It's probably one of the most emotional things I've ever been part in my time sports media.
It really is touching, and I think, you know, Drew and I, it's like, hey, this is a different kind of a competition, okay? And when they asked me to do this, I didn't know what to expect. You know, how do you call these races? And you know, they said you're not going to talk about technique. You're not going to talk about, you know, even really who wins, and it's hard not to because somebody crosses the finish line first. But it's the effort, it's the struggle, and by virtue of making this team, by virtue of showing up here in Berlin, all these athletes are winners. You know, we saw one little boy, Ryan Griffin, today. He's a mini javelin, 100 meters. He brought 12 family members. All right. And they're having as much fun as he is celebrating. They got to get interviewed. And so it's just, you know, the power of sports, bringing people together, and the Olympics. It is the Olympics. And at the Olympic Games, we put down the reason that the Olympics were even started was that we put down our weapons and we become friends for a period of time. And really the true spirit of the Olympics is here at the Special Olympics.
And what's even more amazing to me is that 190 countries have made this commitment to Special Olympics. The financing that it takes to get these kids and these young adults to here, to put them up, and all the different things. You know, there's a lots of countries around the world that you would think wouldn't be interested in this kind of stuff. And it's amazing that over 190 countries are interested in promoting their athletes and their populations this way.
Yeah. There's countries we haven't heard of.
Right.
We're looking them up on Google. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and Jay, there's actually extra emphasis on the Ukraine team that is here, really getting treated extra special here. And it's also nice to see China here. You know, you hear so much in the media about the rift right now, the competition between the United States and China,
right,
politically, and trying to be the world leader. But to see them here and to watch the athletes interact and everything, I almost wish that the world leaders could all come and experience this, and maybe this entire world could be a different place.
So talk about this. I want one more question on Special Olympics. Talk about the Shriver family. If you don't know, the Shriver family is very instrumental in starting Special Olympics. They've been very instrumental in this. Just talk about the commitment by them to make this one of their lifelong missions in life as a family.
Well, I first was introduced to Maria Shriver back in 1992. Believe it or not, when I was part of the Dan and Dave ad campaign.
Right.
And Maria Shriver had her up close and personal TV show. She came and interviewed me. I thought she treated me a little unfairly, but she was, you know, a hard-hitting investigator. And, you know, it was, you know, I'd made a lot of mistakes in college and kind of messed around. And, you know, I was kind of going from a bad boy image to this Olympic athlete. And I got a chance to meet her, know her, but then I would run across her years later. I'd get a call from Carl Lewis one year, and Carl Lewis had a hip surgery, had a hip replacement. But Carl was part of the Shriver Foundation that put on a 5K run down in Cambria, California. It's at the end of a 100-mile ride. So there's a 100-mile bike ride that the Shriver Foundation puts on, and you ride your bike from Monterey down to Cambria, down to Hearst Castle. And then down in the bottom, there's a 5K run. So Carl Lewis was always the host of the 5K run. And so he asked me if I would fill in for him one year. And so I got a chance to be a part of this. And I wasn't very familiar with Best Buddies or the work with the Special Olympics, but the commitment, the passion that the Shrivers have to this, I mean, it's absolutely amazing that this is even happening. And it really, when you see the pictures, when you see the video of the opening ceremonies here in Berlin, I mean, there are 40,000 people showed up for the opening ceremonies for Special Olympics. So
I watched it Sunday. I watched it on Sunday.
Oh,
it was
yeah,
pretty cool.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely amazing. So I mean, you can't say enough about the Shriver family and really what they've done for individuals with mental disabilities.
And to add to that, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's got the documentary out right now on Netflix. It was immediately after his involvement in Special Olympics, he made his run for governor in the state of California, and of course won that office. It was right kind of off the back of Special Olympics. So that's something else to keep in mind. And that kind of brings us to another point. Dan and I, the other night, we had dinner with Tim Tebow, of course, on the ESPN crew. And Dan, it was fun kind of watching the two athletes talk, and Dan kind of kidded him, saying, "Hey man, you still got some quarterback left in you."
Rock stars.
And Tim said, "No, I'm done at least for now." But yeah, it was a really, really fun time getting to know the staff here. And Jay, just to add to that, so we continue to have dinner, and you never know who's going to walk in. Maureen McCormick, Marsha Brady from the Brady Bunch comes up to our table and starts greeting us. I was like, what in the heck? She is heavily involved in this event. She has a brother, from what I understand, that has been involved in Special Olympics for a long time. So that was really cool how this has touched so many people.
You can catch coverage of the Special Olympics on the ESPN platforms, the different ESPN platforms. The opening ceremony was last Sunday live on ABC. They'll have a wrap-up show at the end. Drew, give us a little sense of where you can find all the different events and coverage on the platforms.
Watch it every single day this week on ESPN Plus. We've got cameras at the weightlifting venues, also the swimming venues. Rowdy Gaines, great Olympian from Los Angeles and the greatest voice that's ever done swimming, along with Dan Hicks. He is at the swimming venue. And interesting too, he was telling us that in LA in 2028, that will be his final Olympics, because it's come full circle. He started there 84. He'll finish his career in 2028. Plans to move to Port Charlotte too, Jason, for all Floridians that want to know. But yeah, every day, ESPN Plus, we've got coverage from the Special Olympics. And again, it's an incredible thing to watch.
All right, Dan, I'm going to ask you a couple questions about your career. Obviously, Dan has done several Olympic Games coverage with NBC Sports, and will you be doing the Paris Olympics next year, in a couple years?
My wife certainly hopes so. Disney Paris is on her bucket list, and so I'm right now I'm on the B squad for the NBC squad. I do some live streaming for them. If somebody goes down, I'm ready to go in. But I do work for ITN, which is a British broadcast company for world championships and a lot of non-Olympic track and field coverage. But no, I'm hoping that I'll get a chance to go to Paris next year in one way or another. I'll make it. The two Olympics I haven't been to in the last 26 years, Beijing and Rio are the only two summer games and I've had a chance to attend all the other ones. So hope to be in Paris.
And I'm gonna for all our younger audience that didn't know about Dan O'Brien, Google him, look him up on YouTube. This guy was a unbelievable athlete, and I'm gonna ask him a couple questions about his athletic career in a second. But this guy was the quintessential American athlete after Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn Jenner. This guy was the man. I mean, this guy was an unbelievable athlete. Culminated his career at 96 in Atlanta, winning the gold medal in the decathlon, maybe probably the most grueling event in the Olympic platform. How did you, Dan, talk about how did you get into being a decathlete of all things? How did you focus? This is what I want to do from a professional perspective.
I got into the decathlon because I got a bad grade in social studies, believe it or not. My mom had a rule that if I got anything less than a C, I couldn't participate in the sports that quarter. All right. So I'm in high school. I'm in the 9th grade. I get a D in social studies over the winter quarter. And so my mom doesn't let me go out for track in the spring. And I had a pottery teacher by the name of Larry Hunt who helped me. He said, look, he was my track coach as well. And he was disappointed that I couldn't run track my freshman year. And so he said, look, I'll help you get the grade up. Come in when you need to, extra time, tutoring or whatever. And so he helped me get the grade up, but I didn't know he had an agenda. And so after the quarter was over and I get my report card, I don't have any D's. He goes out to my house and he says, my mother, he's like, look, Mrs. O'Brien, Dan is great. I'd love for him to participate in a summer decathlon. And at that point, I didn't care what track event it was. All I knew was that I was going to get a chance to run track. And it hurt me pretty deeply that I didn't get to participate in track. I had to walk by the track to get home or ride my bike. And so it was heartbreaking. But Larry trained me for my first decathlon in the 9th grade, Southern Oregon State Decathlon. It was held at my high school. And I can remember after my first decathlon, I told Coach Hunt, I said, I am never doing that again. But every year it would come around and I would do it again. And so I got into it in the 9th grade. I went to college. I went to the University of Idaho on a scholarship in decathlon, but I really didn't do a lot of decathlon training my first couple of years, ran hurdles and 400s. It wasn't until my senior year that I had the highest score in the nation in college, and then injured myself, wasn't able to win an NCAA title. But it was a prospect. People looked at me as somebody who had a lot of potential, and I was just lucky enough to come along at the right time. There was a program called the Visa Decathlon program that sponsored the top 10 guys in the U.S. And I got on that program and I excelled. It was one of those things, but I didn't want to be a decathlete. I didn't love the event. I thought it was too difficult. I wanted to be a hurdler. I wanted to be a sprinter. I looked at Carl Lewis and thought, give me the glamour. I one event, I didn't love the 400 or the 1500 meters. But I got a chance to go to the 1988 Olympic trials just based on sheer ability. And I met Jackie Jonah Kersey.
Yep.
And I'm on the practice track and I introduced myself to she and her husband, Bob, and they said, well, what event are you in? And I said, well, I do the decathlon, but I'd rather hurdle and long jump. And in a 20-minute conversation, Jackie and Bob convinced me that the decathlon was my path. And I can remember going home. I only lasted 2 events at the Olympic trials that year, had a bad hamstring. But on the plane going home from Indianapolis, I saw FloJo run the 10:46 and Carl Lewis almost jumped 29 feet in a pouring rain. I was truly inspired, but Jackie, I'll never forget her words. It's like, why are you trying to get out of the decathlon? You need to be in the decathlon. And I made up my mind in 1988 that I was going to stop trying to get out of it. And 3 years later, I was a world champion.
And you were a 3-time world champion at that, not just a 1-timer. He was a 3-time world champion. Let's go to 1996 in Atlanta. Talk about the, if you don't know, the decathlon's broken into 10 events, two days of 5 events each, correct? Is it back-to-back days? No rests?
That's right.
So 5 events each day for two straight days. Everything from the long jump to the mile run to the 400. Grueling events for a runner, for a jumper, whatever it is, whatever first of all, what was your strength? What were the 1 or 2 events that you were really good at, and maybe the 1 or 2 events that you struggled at?
Well, I was a sprinter jumper. And so that made me really kind of a perfect athlete for the decathlon. I could run the 100. I could long jump. I could run the 400. I could hurdle. I even pole vaulted in high school. So I was a pretty decent pole vaulter, just had a bad day in 92 and didn't make the team. But I really only had one weakness, and that was the metric mile at the end, the 1,500 meters. And I just was not a great 1,500 runner. I bet if my VO2 max was tested, I would test very averagely among the decathletes. But my goal was to win an Olympic gold medal. I wrote that goal down early on in my journey in the sport of in the decathlon, and I wanted to be the next Bruce Jenner, and Bruce Jenner was my mentor in the 90s. Somebody who I looked up to, and somebody who I got a chance to spend a lot of time and communicate with. And so my goal was to win Olympic gold medal, and take my place in history amongst those great American decathletes, Bob Mathias and Rafer Johnson, Bill Toomey, Milt Campbell, and of course, Bruce Jenner.
Dan, and I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna ask you both a question here about venues. Talk about the joy when you knew in '96 at that moment in time, I'm gonna freaking win the gold medal here. What was that thought? What was that emotion in your home country, in the trials and turbulence that you went through 4 years before that, not making the team? Just talk about the joy and the exhilaration of knowing, gosh dang it, I'm winning the freaking gold medal here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
You know, what's interesting is somebody else had to tell me. I can hear you. Yes. Yep. You got us?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I can hear you. Yep.
Okay. So so first day of competition goes pretty well. I've got a slim lead. I run a good 400, and the second day, you know, I'm grinding out, and you know, I make my bars in the pole vault, and the javelin is the ninth event. And you know, by the time you get to the javelin, you're pretty tired by that time. And these days are long. You start at 9 in the morning, you're not finishing until 10 p.m. at night, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. But after the javelin was over, I went to the practice track, which was very similar to here in Berlin. You got the main stadium, and then you got the practice track. But I was on the practice track with my training partner, Michael Joubert, and he was a 400-meter runner who went to Washington State, but he represented Australia at 2 different Olympics. But he came out. He wasn't competing that day, and we're on the practice track, and we got about a half an hour before I have to run the last race. And you know, Michael Joubert, just a typical Australian. He just we're in the, you know, we're looking up in the sky and we see the full moon above the stadium, and he said, "Bloody hell, O'Brien! In a 45 minutes, you're going to be a goddamn legend." And I thought about that. Like, I was like, wow. You know, it didn't really hit me until that moment.
Right.
And it was just like, wow. And I never thought of myself as a legend, never thought of myself as, you know, being a Rafer Johnson or a Bob Mathias, but it just kind of hit me at that moment. It was like, wow, you know, I'm going to win the Olympic gold medal. And I had to just go out there, give a solid effort in the 1,500 meters. But I think what I remember is it was a cool journey for me, but it was also, I got to take hundreds of people on the journey with me. Right. My entire family was in the stadium. Half the town of Moscow, Idaho was in that stadium. You know, I gave shout outs to the people of Pullman, Washington, and Klamath Falls, Oregon. And, you know, it was really neat to be able to, you know, let those people experience it as well and have a victorious day. And even a buddy of mine back in Moscow, Idaho said, you know, "Hey man, you won the gold and I got lucky, and because of it," and, you know, he thanked me for that. It was kind of a funny deal, but, you know, I had so many people that I was connected to at that particular time. And I think when I failed to make the team in 92, I got a ton of fans to go into 1996.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a really cool feeling.
And for you, Drew, talk about calling a big event in a big venue, whether it's football. I know you do a lot of soccer. Just talk about the enthusiasm when you're in a big venue, calling an event, just in general, the emotion.
Well, first I thought you were going to ask me about my athletic career for about 15 minutes.
Well, your broken jumper, your jumper was broken about 16 years old at Leto High School.
Well, that's another story for another day. You know, Jason,
God, I wouldn't want to see you on the track. I wouldn't want to see you on the track trying to run an 800 meter. That would be a sight to see, brother.
No, there's definitely a reason I'm in the booth, but you know, I've been in the business for a long time now, more than a couple decades, and been doing events since 2005. And I really enjoy covering a lot of the events. We're covering athletes that normally don't get the exposure that they deserve. Dan and I were talking later on this summer. You know, Jay, I take part in the Little League World Series, so I get a chance to work that event for ESPN. So that's a great event. This event, a chance to tell stories and put athletes in the spotlight that don't normally ever get that stage. So just getting the opportunity to do events like this, meet people like Dan and work with Dan. You know, I'm blessed to do it. And it has not disappointed thus far. It's been a great trip, and we're going to finish this thing out strong. We're on the air until Saturday.
Now you guys are doing all. Last thing, I'll get you out of here. You guys are doing all track and field events, correct? All at the same venue, correct?
Yes.
From now, you
Yeah.
doing? Are there javelin? So there's everything from javelin throws to runs to shot puts, everything, correct?
Now there's an apparatus called the mini javelin, an apparatus. It's a piece of equipment, the mini javelin, used specifically for Special Olympics.
Sure.
But Dan taught me today. It was a special feature package that ESPN packaged. Dan and I got up early this morning, went out to the field. He gave me a one-on-one, session on how to throw this thing. And he knows all the history about it. Again, you can watch it on ESPN Plus and see, and I believe it'll also be on the Wrap Show as well. But, little things like that. I threw that thing. Jay, you would have been impressed, man. I still got something left right here, brother.
Well, fellas, it's been a real pleasure, man. Awesome talking to you guys. I know the experience of being in Berlin for 8 or 9 days is probably life-changing or awesome. The Olympic Stadium and all the things you guys are doing and getting people you're getting to meet. Thanks so much for the time. Keep up the great coverage on all the ESPN platforms. Folks, check it out, ESPN Plus. There will be a wrap-up show. What is the last day, Drew? July? Is it July? What's the last day of the event?
I believe it's July 26th.
June 26th.
Yeah.
Yep. Sunday. Yep.
June 26th. June 26th.
So there'll be a wrap-up show on ABC, ESPN. So definitely find it on your TV dial. Again, fellas.
Yeah. And just before we go to Jay, kind of our favorite thing we like to say whenever, we always quote great sports calls of the past. And we always like to say to each other, 9-7-9. The call from Charlie Jones. I believe that was Ben Johnson.
It was.
In that showdown in 1988. But Dan's got some great iconic memories and moments from Olympic history as well. And it's been great hearing those firsthand from him this week.
Dan, I could talk to you for an hour, man. I really could. I don't want to. Maybe we'll do it. Seriously, maybe we'll do it again, a little longer form. I'd love to talk to you.
Be glad to.
The stories are awesome, man. This guy's an Olympic gold medal champion, a legend in the world of decathlon, an American hero when it came to the decathlon back in me and Drew's prime. 96 was our prime, man. That was in our wheelhouse. So I remember every moment of that stuff. And keep up the great work, fellas, doing the great work you guys are doing. The special athletes that you're dealing with, shout out to every one of them, every one of those young adults and boys and girls that are involved in that. What a job they do and what a job you guys are doing covering them. Keep up the great work and have a great visit in Berlin.
Thanks, Jay.
You got it. Thanks for finding us on the Powers on Sports podcast. We'll be right back with Kevin Brockway of the Gainesville Sun.